All right, we are back. Justin Boone, it is time to get to your waiver wire selections here heading into week 5. Let's start at the quarterback position.
Yeah, we'll go position by position here, and we'll start with QBs. Jackson Dart is a name that we have talked about on the show before, who I've written up in the column a whole bunch. I had him listed in there as a high upside stash for a few weeks, and then last week when we got news that it was going to be Russell Wilson stepping down, it was going to be his job, all of a sudden he became the number 1 quarterback pickup in the column last week, and a guy that we knew had some rushing value, was going to be able to get out there, potentially give us a high floor, and sure enough, in his first game out there, what does he do? He runs 10 times for 54 yards and a touchdown. He plays through a hamstring injury in that game. He even got checked for a concussion at one point. He also threw for 111 yards, which doesn't look that great, but he did have 1 passing touchdown. And that might not seem like huge stats, but this is why the Konami code, shout out Rich Rebar, is a thing, because right now he's the QB9 on the week thanks to all those rushing stats, and that's just with the Monday night doubleheader left to be played here. So it's a good chance he's going to finish as a low-end QB1 in his first start. And I know the loss of Malik Neighbors, the torn ACL, that is just a massive hit for his fantasy outlook. But I think with the rushing ability, I think with some of the other guys they have there, he can still be a meaningful fantasy asset, a guy that gets into your starting lineup thanks to the rushing production. So he's going to have a much easier opponent as well in week 5. He gets to go up against the Saints. I think that's going to be a spot you definitely want to use him. And then we'll see from there. Another guy, if we want to look down more at like the streamers that are available in a lot of leagues, Matthew Stafford going against the 49ers. The Rams offense here starting to find its groove. He had 375 passing yards, 3 touchdowns last week. Really, really phenomenal performance from him there. He's on a short week here against the 49ers. Traditionally hasn't had a ton of success against them, but the Niners also don't have Nick Bosa, so this is a slightly different defense. The Rams are 4.5-point favorites in that game. I think Stafford's going to be a solid streamer. You could also look to Sam Darnold. And before the season, I never thought that I would be mentioning Sam Darnold as somebody that you could potentially play and stream. I thought when he left Minnesota, when he got away from Kevin O'Connell, we weren't going to see the production from him. But this week, going up against the Buccaneers, he's not going to be a week winner for you, but a guy who has been better than expected, and a guy that could just be that steady fantasy producer in your lineup, get you through some bye weeks, get you through some injuries, 16, 17 fantasy points. That's all you need from a streamer. If you get that, you got to be happy with it. And he's going against the Bucs, and that Bucs defense has been all right this year, but there's still a plus matchup for fantasy quarterbacks. So Darnold, a competent streamer. And then I always like to throw in a stash at every position, and there's not a lot to choose from at quarterback. And don't laugh, Harmon. I'm going to say J.J. McCarthy. We're probably not going to see him for a couple weeks. He's probably not going to come back until after the bye. I'm not touting him as a guy who's going to be a QB1, but we have seen other young quarterbacks sit down for a little bit and then come back and perform better. I'm thinking to Bryce Young last year when he sat out, and then when he returned in the second half of the season, he was a much better player. He looked much more composed out there. Let's hope we see that from McCarthy. This one just boils down, though, to Carson Wentz is not the answer. We saw that on the weekend.
No.
Carson Wentz can put up some stats, but he is not the guy that they want to trust. They want to get the young quarterback out there. They want to see if he can be that dude. I still think he can be. It's just going to be maybe a little bit longer of a process. Also, he will come back to an environment that's different. He's going to have Jordan Addison now. He's going to have Christian Darrisaw out there. We'll see if Ryan Kelly, who had his second concussion of the year, we'll see if he's healthy in a couple weeks and able to play. So it's going to be a slightly different setting. I'm not going to put the bar as high as it was for McCarthy before, but still somebody that you could grab. You put him on your bench, and let's see what happens now that the Vikings have all their guys back.
Yeah, it's tough. That offensive line, dealing with the injuries that it is, that's difficult. Brian O'Neill, the right tackle, also banged up coming out of that game. Obviously, Donovan Jackson as well. So they are definitely that was the whole point of this offense this year, is they were going to reestablish the run game. They were going to have this great pocket for J.J. McCarthy to sit back into, and that just has not happened because Darrisaw's been out. Now he's back. Now Ryan Kelly's got 2 concussions in back-to-back weeks. It's just, that's going to be difficult. But I agree with you that, okay, Carson Wentz might be able to get the football to the receivers, for fantasy purposes, but let's be serious here for a second. He's not about to turn into the next Sam Darnold. And I'm always on the wrong side of history with these quarterback reclamation projects, but I feel pretty good saying that, Carson Wentz and his catapult arm back there that takes forever to load up is not the answer behind this offensive line. That is for sure. Jackson Dart is interesting. I just wonder how repeatable that is every single week. All the quarterback designed rushing stuff. As good of a runner as he is he really about to be like Jalen Hurts? I mean, maybe Daniel Jeremiah did kind of compare him to Jalen Hurts as a prospect. There was some of that, right? But with no Malik Neighbors and, going against some tougher defenses this week against New Orleans, I think you could stream him potentially as a superflex QB2. Going against tougher defenses, I don't know. I remain a little skeptical about this Giants offense without Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, the ceiling without Neighbors definitely it comes down a little bit for everybody, especially Dart. But that's the situation we're at with quarterbacks, right? I'm recommending J.J. McCarthy as the stash. Sure. Who else is there? You could look at Dylan Gabriel. Maybe eventually he'll get under center for the Browns later in the season. No, we're not going to go to that place. So let's move on to a position that is much more fun. It actually has our top ad of
this
the
is
week,
much
that's
better.
Running back, right? Yeah. Woody Marks. Okay. Woody Marks is somebody that we talked about all the way back in the summer, right? He wasn't even necessarily going by Woody at that point. And yet now Woody Marks becoming a household name, getting more opportunity here. And we've just seen that Nick Chubb can still get what's blocked, is still a competent back, but isn't going to get you much more than that. We see Marks come out this week. The team clearly gives him the opportunity. And he delivers 69 rushing yards and a touchdown on 17 carries, another 50 yards and a score on 4 receptions. Nick Chubb is serviceable. They need more than that. They can't just get by with a guy that's serviceable in the backfield. So Mark showing that he can do that. Clearly the coaching staff saw it. He went from 11% of the snaps in week 1 to 27% in week 2 to 48 in week 3 to 56 on Sunday. It looks like he is taking over this backfield. His 21 touches, those are the most by a Texans running back this year. We also got a report today that Joe Mixon not close to returning and might not even be coming back this year, which we've already speculated. So I think you could look at Marks as somebody that could get into the RB2 conversation for fantasy, and he gets a really nice draw against that banged up Ravens defense in week 5. Baltimore's been one of the 5 easiest matchups for fantasy running back. So Marks is an extremely important ad right now. I think if you need a running back, you look at spending at least 50% of your budget, maybe more on him. I think, like I said, he's somebody that we could be talking about as a top 24 option the rest of the season. Not many of those come along. We had one last week in Trey Benson. Now we're getting another one potentially this week in Marks. Kendre Miller on the Saints. I did not anticipate the game that he had this week. And Alvin Kamara continues to be the lead back in New Orleans. There's no question about that. He's playing over 70% of the snaps. But Miller's usage has increased in recent weeks. He played a season-high 31% of the snaps in the loss to the Bills, had 11 carries for 65 yards and a score. And that touchdown run, that was one of the highlights of the weekend, Harmon, right? He just refused to go down, was breaking tackles, made it to the end zone on that one. I think this performance is going to earn him more opportunity as well. And we're talking about a team as scrappy as the Saints have been, right? They're not giving up. They're not throwing in the towel. They play right till the end, which is great for fantasy because they have some guys that can produce for fantasy. We want to see them go all the way to the final whistle. I think at 0-4 with this team, do they start to look to the future more? Do they start to maybe play some of the younger guys? Could they potentially, we've talked about it, could they trade Alvin Kamara? I don't think Kamara wants to leave the city, but it's not like he's asking to be traded. But does it make sense for them to move him to a contender and then give Kendre Miller more of that backfield? I think it would. Regardless, Miller's now put himself in the conversation as a flex guy who's one injury or one trade or one coaching decision away from getting more work in that backfield. You like to see him coming through on his opportunities there. Kenneth Gainwell. Now, this one isn't as much me telling people to go out and pick him up, but I want to address it because he goes out and just has this dominant performance, and some people might not even have seen it on Sunday morning. Did it in Europe, 134 scrimmage yards, 2 touchdowns, replaces Jaylen Warren in that game, and basically plays the Jaylen Warren role. But Jaylen Warren, you think, is probably going to be back after their week 5 bye, so you don't get an opportunity to maybe start Gainwell this week. And then if Warren comes back, then Gainwell just returns to being a bench guy, a really, really deep flex option maybe. But he's that one injury away guy now. So you can pick him up as long as you know that's what you're getting. You're getting the one injury away guy. You're not necessarily getting somebody that you can plug and play into your lineup. So as good as he was in that game, you're not going to get those results. So don't go crazy. Don't spend up to get him. And then for a stash out running back, I know producer Colin's going to love this. I'm not here to try to make producer Colin happy, but Jaden Blue on the Cowboys Harmon, I mean, we have given Colin a hard time about Blue. Going back to the injury in the preseason, was he ever going to become anything? There's a possibility that he could finally get his chance here. Miles Sanders left with an ankle injury on Sunday. We'll see how bad it is. Sometimes ankle injuries, they can swell over 24 hours. They can get worse after the fact. So we'll have to monitor that one. But if Sanders were sidelined, that could open the door for Blue. And he's just a day 3 rookie. We're not going to go crazy on this. We're not going to get ahead of ourselves on expectations, but he is very quick. He's got good pass catching skills. He could be that big play complement next to Javonte Williams. So Blue, in my mind, is worth stashing right now, even though we've given producer Colin so much flack about him over the last month or two.
Yeah, if you have a roster spot, I wouldn't mind sticking him there. You just have no idea if he's going to be anything like this week or next or whatever. But I agree that it might be getting close to Jaden Blue time. I want to go back to Woody Marks here. That was a really impressive performance by him. As a matter of fact, that last game for Texans against the Titans, that is the 8th best rushing success rate for the Texans the last 2 seasons. In that game, that's how pitiful the Texans' run game has been the last couple of years. One of the best rushing performances at 33% success rate, by the way. So, I think Woody Marks could maybe help this thing out a little bit. I think it's just time to get the younger guys involved there in Houston. He might be even more like a 70%er to me from a fab perspective. Just he might be the starting running back for this team the rest of the way. And I think this is an offense that can turn things around to some degree. I think people have overly freaked out about Nico Collins. I think that the offensive line does still need to gel together, but it is a very new system, a lot of new terminology, a lot of new here. I think we could see better things from the Texans going forward. That makes me a little more interested in Woody Marks. And yeah, Kendre Miller, man. I mean, this is just I think the best running back collection we've had so far this season potentially. These 4 guys here, especially the first 3. But yeah, Kendre Miller coming on has been pretty exciting because that has certainly been like a storyline since he got drafted by the Saints, that the former coaching staff just kind of wanted nothing to do with him, and he's finally maybe earning something with a new group there. And Alvin Kamara just shouldn't be on this team, bro. He should be in Kansas City. He should be in Chicago. I don't know. He should be somewhere else other than the damn Saints. So I think Kendre Miller, if anything happened there, he would immediately become a fantasy starter. Any other parting shots on these guys before we throw it a break?
No, I would say, though, if you roster Alvin Kamara, to go get Kendre Miller, and maybe if a trade does happen, you could end up with 2 starters along the way.
Ooh.
So make sure you're going to get Kendre Miller. Well, as much as we hate this one, right? Malik Neighbors suffering that season-ending ACL tear, but it does open up opportunity for other guys. So we wish Neighbors the best. We want to see him back healthy. It's the worst of worst situations here, but we have to look at who else is going to get opportunity, and you look no further than Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton. And Wan'Dale Robinson, we've talked about before, so he's right up at that almost 50% cutoff. He's 49% rostered right now. These guys are going to get to go against the Saints this week, like we talked about with Jackson Dart, so that's a nice matchup there. And, in Neighbors' absence last week, like we saw Robinson and Slayton start to step up here, and Robinson's numbers, like, they have dipped over the last couple weeks from what he was doing early in the season when we were talking about him as a big waiver wire pickup or a guy that you could grab and throw into your lineup. Just 4 catches for 40 yards the last 2 weeks after 14 catches for 197 and a touchdown in the first 2 games. And one of those games was that crazy game against the Cowboys that went to overtime, and Russ was just throwing the moon balls and he was going off. But it shows you that there is a ceiling here for Wan'Dale Robinson. He's not just that PPR scam necessarily. And I think it's worth noting that his playing time increased, right? So he was playing around 75% of the snaps in the previous 3 games. In this game, with Neighbors going out, that goes up to 97%. I see Robinson as the most talented, healthy receiver on this roster. And I think he's a guy that could give you wide receiver 3 flex numbers moving forward. So I think he's somebody that you definitely want to try to go get. Meanwhile, Slayton, he's had stretches before, right? And even this season, kind of underrated, right? 2 for 61, 4 for 30, 3 for 44 over his last 3 games. Like, he puts up production. It's not necessarily production you're going to want to throw into your lineup. But with Neighbors not around, yeah, you could consider it. And he's had good stretches in the past. You go back to the end of 2023, the last 4 games in that regular season, he was a top 12 fantasy receiver on a point per game basis. That was before Neighbors got there, of course, right? But he can do it over short stretches. Let's see if he can get out there. Again, not a guy you're going to want to break the bank on, but somebody could give you flex stats, somebody that could help you with some bye weeks coming up. So you could look to him. Somebody else that needs to be added, but he's actually going to be on bye in week five. So you got to think about this, right? You're going to pick him up. You can't put him in your lineup. You pick him up to stash him and play him later. It's Romeo Doubs on the Packers. He's 40% rostered right now, coming off a career game. A lot of people having career games against the Cowboys defense this year. It was an easy opponent for sure, but man, he took advantage of that matchup, right? 3 touchdowns. And this is a guy that's had boom weeks in the past. Tended to be a pretty inconsistent fantasy producer. We talk about how the Packers like to spread the ball around. A lot of guys are going to get involved. Sometimes it's tough for guys to be consistent in that offense. But with Jaden Reed out until later in the season, with Christian Watson still sidelined, Matthew Golden kind of working his way into more of a role there, Doubs has a chance to be Green Bay's #1 receiver here for the next stretch. Just remember, he is on bye, so you can't play him this week. But you're getting a guy that, is at least a touchdown or bust kind of wide receiver 3 flex option. So another guy that you could get. There's normally a lot of them, so you don't want to pay up on the waiver wire for that type, but these are guys that you should go out and pick up because you can use them. I've mentioned this next dude a ton. We don't need to spend too much time on it. We already hit on him during the show. Alec Ayomanor, like 31% rostered at this point. How is he not more rostered? Like he's becoming, in the past, when I used to write the waiver wire column elsewhere, there was a guy, Tim Patrick, and I used to write about him every single week when he was on the Broncos, how great he was producing, how he's a wide receiver 3 for fantasy. Everybody's got to go get him. And every week, his roster percentage did not change that much, and he still was producing. Well, that's what I think about Ayomanor right now, right? He's putting up decent numbers. Maybe it's because it's the Titans offense. People don't want to invest in it, but he is a guy that is producing. He is a guy that I would arguably say is the #1 receiver in that offense. At least 5 targets in every game so far, leading the team in targets, leading the team in receiving yards, leading the team in touchdown catches. So he is somebody you could go out and slide into your lineup for sure. And then I want to mention a stash at receiver here. Isaiah Bond. Normally the Browns receivers aren't a group that you're going to necessarily want to invest in. And yet we see right now Cedric Tillman dealing with a hamstring issue is going to sideline him for, they're saying, weeks. Isaiah Bond has been coming on here. He took over the number 3 role in week 3, played 65% of the snaps. This week, 6 targets, caught 3 of them for 58 yards. Looks like he's going to be the biggest beneficiary there. So not somebody you're going to play, somebody you're going to stash to see if he can take on a bigger role.
Okay, I'm going to just real quick react to this list here because I've got something on everybody here. One, shout out to you telling people to get back on Wan'Dale Robinson right when he's back to averaging minus 0.1 air yards per target. So Wan'Dale's back on his BS, baby. 5 targets, 4.7 yards per reception. He's back. We're back on the Wan'Dale Robinson 100 catches. Watch. Oh my God,
Love
disgusting stuff. Romeo Doubs and Alec Ayomanor are my player comparison for Alec Ayomanor was Romeo Doubs. So it's funny that you have from a pre-draft perspective, it's funny you have these guys here because they're kind of the, and like from an alignment perspective this year, they've been similar as well. They're just these solid, not special X receiver types that probably don't get consistent enough volume because they're not those kind of needle movers. But it's Doubs. I think Doubs plays on a better offense, but it's just funny. Those two guys are that nobody wants to ever pick that type up. So like you said, Tim Patrick, nobody wants to pick that type up, but they will have their weeks. And Isaiah Bond, very talented player. The Browns are second in the NFL in pass attempts. The only reason that he was not signed earlier is he turned himself in for sexual assault on April 10th before the draft. So there was that legal situation. That's why he was signed so late, which is why people might not be like, who the hell is Isaiah Bond? Obviously, a lot of off-field stuff to consider with him, but he is a very talented player on an offense that's throwing the football a lot. Let's get to tight ends here. Some interesting names as well. Rip these ones for us here.
Yeah, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this one because we've talked about these guys before, right? I would say the top pickup this week is Brenton Strange on the Jags. He's 28% rostered. They're going up against the Chiefs this week. Not a league-winning pickup. I like to identify this. This isn't somebody that's going to turn into a week winner for you, but he's been a surprisingly solid producer at a position where a lot of fantasy managers are struggling. So through 4 games, he's finished as a tight end 17 or better 3 times. He's got back-to-back top 15 results. 14 targets over the last 2 weeks. That's good enough to go out and get him. put him in your lineup. Hope he gets you by and has a decent game. Harold Fannin Jr., I'm not even going to talk about because we talked about him every single week, but I will say the playing time is rising. We're seeing him potentially pass David Njoku in some settings. So I think you're going to want to look to him as the season goes along. He's a guy that you could stream, tight end 2 streamer type right now, but somebody that I think is only going to get better as the season goes along here. Someone who's very interesting, a deeper guy, Theo Johnson on the Giants. We're talking about the receivers stepping up. What about Theo Johnson, the tight end, maybe getting some more work here? I think that's interesting. He flashed last year. He had some decent games. Could he potentially do that? Not somebody you're going to start, but somebody you're going to stash here and see if he can take advantage of some more opportunities. And then Elijah Arroyo, the rookie, before the season, we were saying, could he be someone in the Seattle offense? Well, we're starting to see it. His playing time just increased to 55% of the snaps this week. That's his highest mark of the year, resulted in a season-high 44 yards on 4 targets. Another stash option, but somebody with a ton of potential.
All right, buddy, give us your deep sleeper here real quick before we go.
What am I missing on DJ Giddens? Why aren't people more excited about this guy as like a 1 injury away option? Jonathan Taylor having a great season, I know, but DJ Giddens just 4% rostered. He's the next man up if Jonathan Taylor gets hurt. Tyler Goodson, the other back in that backfield, the other depth piece, he got injured this week, groin injury. So now there's really no reason to not go out and stash Giddens. We do not want to see Jonathan Taylor get hurt. I will knock on wood here, but DJ Giddens, very, very undervalued, should be rostered almost everywhere in my mind.